Hi, I'm Oscar, one half of the F1 couple, and today I'm here to talk to you about IndyCar, and more specifically the Grand Prix of Alabama from Barber Motorsport Park. This is my first time talking about IndyCar, and if you haven't seen it before, I 100% recommend you go and watch it because it's great. If you love F1, you're going to love IndyCar because it's fairly similar, except you have some crazier street circuits, some absolutely banging racetracks, and then you also throw in the oddball of ovals in there. And the racing is, I don't know, everyone this season has been pretty good, so it's fairly similar. But I would say compared to previous seasons, it's been even better than F1. So I'll start off with qualifying, and like I said, if you're new to IndyCar, you'll probably find qualifying a bit strange, the format of it, but I personally really like it. I think it works really well. So how it works, firstly, it's split up into two groups, and the top 6 from each group progress into the second round, and then in that round, the top 6 progress into the final round, known as the Fast 6, which then is a very short session of shootout for the pole position, basically. So it doesn't sound that different to F1. I mean, the two groups at the beginning, that's kind of different, but other than that, sort of losing cars each time, it doesn't sound that radical. But what I really like about it is that the timing line for qualifying isn't the start-finish line. It's a point on the track that's just before the pit lane. So it means you can go out, you can then do a flying lap, and immediately after you finish for your flying lap, you can drive straight into the pits, change tyres. It just lose the kind of the lost time that you have from having to do another in-lap to go back to the pits. It just makes qualifying flow so much better. So let's dive in, have a little bit of a look at how quali went. And in Group 1, it was Scott McLaughlin, who's up there in the championship. Pato Ward, you have to say it's underperformed so far this year. His teammate, Rosenquist, who's already had a pole, actually. And then you got Palou, Rossi and Rahal also going through into the next round. And you have to say probably the biggest names missing out, Scott Dixon, just missing out by 100th of a second there. But also Will Power, who's a veteran of the sport really, but still incredibly fast. He would be very disappointed being down in 10th place. Looking at Group 2 now, and of course there was David Malukas, who had a crash which brought out the red flag and prematurely ended the session, which ruined several people's laps. And he was also joined by Castro Neves going for a spin, who was a bit lucky really that Malukas was there to bring out the red flag and he didn't cause any local yellows or anything like that to lose lap times, is what happens in IndyCar. So the guys who progressed were Grosjean and Herta up at the top, those two Andretti cars looking really good this weekend, followed by championship leader Newgarden, Rinus VK, Callum Ilott, who's managed to get into the next round for the first time in his one-car team, which is actually quite an impressive feat, given that you'd usually expect that car to be a bit of a back marker, certainly towards the lower end of the grid. And also Marcus Ericsson going through as well. Christian Lundgaard, very disappointed to miss out by just 100th of a second. That's pretty much nothing in it really over a lap. Simon Pagenaud also having to be disappointed, down second last in this group. So if we move on to the next round, and now it's a group of 12, where the top 6 are again going to advance to the next round, but there's only one group this time. So it's O'Ward, McLaughlin, Rossi, Rosenquist, VK and Palou who go through, but the championship leader Newgarden is out. This isn't helped by, again, the session being cut short. This time it was Ericsson who spun into the gravel on his final flying lap, which brought out the red and then ended the session. And really, it's Herta who can be most aggrieved by this, because he was looking fast all weekend through the practice sessions in the first stint of quali. But out in this stage, went out a bit later than he'd have liked, and that meant that he didn't get to set a decent time, one that would have seen him definitely through because of that red flag for Marcus Ericsson. So on to the last session, the Firestone Fast 6, and it's Rinus VK who takes pole position with over a tenth and a half over Pato O'Ward, with Alex Palou in third, Scott McLaughlin fourth, and then we have Rossi and Rosenquist rounding out this group. But definitely a great lap from VK. And hopefully he can take this forward into the race, have a very good one, because honestly I've not been that impressed with him so far this year, but then this is the first time at a purpose-made circuit, so maybe that car is just built to be better around these proper racetracks. So moving on to the race itself, and the top 6 off the start, very much as you were, but Callum Ilott made a very good start, up a few positions into 8th, but Newgarden was sliding the other way a little bit on his harder compound tyres down to 10th. Not ideal for the championship leader. And honestly, not a great deal really happened in the opening stint of the race. Yes, McLaughlin made a move on Palou to get into 3rd, but other than that, it was actually fairly quiet for IndyCar. So Ericsson's the first guy to dive for the pit lane, and is then followed the next lap by a gaggle of cars, which included Newgarden. And these are the guys who are going to be going on to the 3-stop strategy rather than most of the other front runners who are going to try and do it in 2 stops. Not a good stop, however, for Carl Kirkwood, who seemed to have a very sticky front right, I believe it was, and it actually dropped him a lap down. So I think he'd been showing some good pace so far this season, not particularly in quali, but this completely ruined his race. Grosjean then comes into the pits, but Newgarden's able to jump him with his tyres already a bit warmed up. That's definitely a theme of IndyCar. It takes a while for the tyres to get switched on, maybe a lap or so. So he was able to get through with that extra grip, just enough to make the pass. And then Colton Herta is able to get through past his teammate Grosjean as well, with a very hard but fair battle between the two. Lap 30 and all of the front running guys on the 2-stop strategy come into the pits, cycling Newgarden and Herta to the front, with VK now in 3rd, followed by Grosjean, O'Ward and McLaughlin. It's heartbreak for Ilott as he spins out into the gravel whilst battling with Castro and Neves, and this also brings out the safety car, or caution, as it's called in IndyCar. This also really ruins the race for all of the guys who are on the 3-stop, as they now, they kind of have to pit with all the gaps being closed up. That's including the likes of Newgarden, Herta, Grosjean, and actually they're now at the back of the pack. So as we go green again, as the caution's withdrawn, it's VK who's back at the front, followed by O'Ward and McLaughlin, and then Rossi and Palou chasing as well. Herta is fighting back really well as he gets Newgarden off the start, and then through some of the slower cars of Malukas, DeFrancesco, Lundgaard, Salto and Pagenaud as well, which fires him straight up into the top 10 after, it wasn't looking like he was going to be in that position a few laps before. Herta then gets Rosenquist as well, who's been really slipping back after the caution came in. He's already been passed by Dixon, Power and Rahal, and then a lap later he's also passed by Pagenaud as well, and then drops out of the top 10 and out of any real contention for fighting for decent points. After several failed attempts, Grosjean finally managed to make a pass stick on Newgarden, but at this point it's only for 14th place after the 3-stop strategy didn't work out. The final pit stops for those on the 2-stopper kicks off on lap 61, and then it's the leaders of VK, O'Ward and McLaughlin. They come in 1 lap later altogether. And then on their out lap, O'Ward managed to switch his tyres on a little bit better and use some push to pass in order to get past VK to take what is effectively the race lead. A great move by the McLaren driver. The following lap, the 3-stoppers are then coming in, but also Dixon comes in at this point as well. He's managed to go a lap further, saving fuel as he always manages to do so well. And actually gets past McLaughlin after McLaughlin made a little bit of a mistake. So that's effectively him up to 3rd now. Even more impressively than Dixon is Palou, who's gone a further lap and manages to jump VK. So he's up into 2nd now on the road. Very impressive. Clearly he's been learning something from his Chip Ganassi teammate Dixon there. And it's now Power's turn to make a move. He's got past McLaughlin and up into 5th, which is so impressive given that he started in 19th place. That's a heck of a move up the grid from Power, really showing his experience. And he's not done there either, as he gets past Dixon for 4th. It's absolutely brilliant racing from him. I'm sure after qualifying he would have expected to be this far up the grid. And as Power's going past Dixon, Herta attempts to make the same move for 6th on McLaughlin, but it doesn't come off and he managed to spin the car and drop a few positions, and it's so frustrating because he'd been on such a good race and it's just another mistake. He made one in Long Beach as well, but obviously this one's not quite as bad. In Long Beach he completely binned it in the wall and was out. But at least here he was able to carry on and mop up some points later on. Then a bit of a controversial moment with 4 laps left as Grosjean and Rahal make a bit of contact. And certainly after the race, Rahal was very vocal about it, saying Grosjean had just swiped into him, basically. I don't know, maybe a little bit more on the fence than that, but it certainly didn't look great from Grosjean. It did look like he kind of just sort of drove into the side of him. Not intentionally, I'm sure he didn't want to make contact, but wanted to put on a bit of a squeeze and maybe underestimated how much space there was. Ultimately, though, it works out okay for both of them as they manage to keep it pointing in the right direction. So as they go over the line, it's O'Ward who takes the win from Palou in second and VK in a bit of a distant third. It's Power, Dixon and McLaughlin who complete that top six. Then behind them, Grosjean actually managed to get seventh on the last lap, passing Rahal, and he was definitely struggling with fuel towards the end. They had to pull off right after the checkered flag. And then they're followed by two further Andrettis of Rossi and Herta, but you have to imagine Herta will be disappointed with that, really. So we have a look at the standings. After those 10 we've already mentioned, we had Pagenaud, who you have to imagine is pretty pleased with that after a dreadful qualifying. I mean, he was on the second last row, wasn't he? So out to 11th place is a pretty good drive. Ericsson following them, I mean, he'll be disappointed, you say. He's finished where he started, so it's not that bad, but he'd have been hoping for more. If we go and have a look at the rest, Newgarden in 14th, definitely disappointed as he was leading the championship coming into this race. Rosenqvist in 16th, he slid down just towards the end of that race from what could have been a very promising finish in the top 5 or 6. And probably the other one you'd look at there and be disappointed is Callum Ilott, 25th, 2 laps down after spinning into the gravel. Still finish because that's how it works in IndyCar. You spin into the gravel, you get a truck come tow you out and you can still go to the finish line, but he looked like that car had so much pace this weekend, so definitely disappointing for him. If we turn our attention to the driver's standings now, and it's reigning champion Alex Palou back at the top of the standings for the first time this year, 144 points. Only 3 points behind him, it's got McLaughlin, who was leading after the first couple of races. 1-4-1 for him. And not far back, Newgarden, he'll be disappointed though after this weekend. 1-2 in a row, but it's not worked out for him at all this weekend. And Will Power, who's there just on absolute brutal consistency. I think he's been in the top 5, is it, every race? Or something ridiculous like that. And then race winner from this time out, O'Ward in 5th. If we try and pick out some of those we think are maybe underperforming, Grosjean in 8th. Yes, he's had a podium this year, but the speed of that car compared to the results he's had has been disappointing, I'd say. And probably even to a larger extent, Herta in 11th, sort of almost half the points of the championship leader after 4 races. Not great for a guy who looks like he has so much pace, but just hasn't had any sort of results to go with it, really. And if we look further down the standings, I mean, Rossi, 13th, like several years ago, he was right up there at the top, and he's just had ridiculous bad luck and some mistakes of his own doing thrown in there as well over the last couple of seasons. But this weekend looked like it was a bit of an up for him, but in the race didn't seem to have lots of pace. Yes, a top 10 finish, but he'd have been hoping for more after going to the fast 6. And you'd have to say Rosenqvist as well. Qualifying has been pretty decent, much improved from last year where it was definitely his weakest point. But this time it's race pace where it all seems to be going away. Then the rookie pack currently being led by Carl Kirkwood, but it's all pretty tight amongst those guys towards the back as they sort of pick up similar number of points in every race. So if you're new to IndyCar, there's not really a Constructors' Championship at all. It's all very much focused on the drivers, and the team who wins the drivers is the biggest one. Or, I mean, there is the engine side of it as well, but that's just Chevrolet against Honda. But Chevrolet definitely winning that at the moment. That's engine has taken wins in every race so far, looking pretty tidy that. And on all different types, two street circuits, 1 oval, and now 1 permanent road course as well. So Chevrolet engine definitely doing better than Honda. Anyway, that's it for this race. Kicking off the month of May, which of course includes the Indy Road Race, followed by the Indy 500. Very, very excited for that. I will of course be covering that as best I can. And other things that are going on, I mean, we've been in a very busy time with trying to move house and new jobs and things like that. So our regular F1 podcast is taking a little bit of a backseat, but that will be back. Don't you worry. Charlotte is still kicking about somewhere, just not right here at the moment. Working very hard on her other endeavours. So that's why I just have my lovely voice for things like this. But yeah, like I say, we'll be back for that soon. As always, like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is on whatever platform you're watching or listening. As always, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, we're at the F1 Couple to keep up to date with everything us, and until next time, I'll see you later.